All right, hello everybody. I'm just calling to order the first Darien Pickleball Committee. And what we are, just so you know, what we want to accomplish is to meet on a monthly basis. I know I said bi-monthly we were going to do it, but we're going to put up a motion to meet on a monthly basis, the second Tuesday of every month. And the purpose is to find a solution near-term and eventually long-term to satisfy the need for pickleball in Darien. It is certainly a need that's grown over the years. It's grown but tremendously in the last couple of months. And we just don't have the facilities for it right now. But there are some options that we have short-term that we could work on, and then eventually we can discuss also long-term solutions. Okay. First, what I'd like to do, since it is the first meeting, is introduce who the committee is. So I want to introduce John Deary and Helen Johnson, Bob Marchese, and Sarah Knudsen, who is not here today, but she had a prior commitment, but she'll be here next week, or next month, I should say. So again, what I'd like to do first is make the notion to go to once a month instead of twice a month. So is the committee okay with that? Okay, John, you second it? Great. Bob, good? Helen?
Good.
Okay, great. And I just think that we were going to do it every other week. My hopes were at that time was that, well, we come to a solution faster, but I do think we're going to need the time to digest what we find at the meetings, the public comments that we may receive from our neighbors about their thoughts as well, and then do our own homework on gathering numbers and things like that. So once a month would probably be ideally the way to do it. I hope not to drag this out either. I hope that we'll be able to arrive at a solution by March, hopefully, something that will, at least short-term by then, something that will enable pickleball users, players to be able to get out and use courts then. And then we'll be working on a long-term solution, which is probably eventually building a court somewhere, though I don't know where at this point. So a couple of the things that, a couple of solutions that we have would be to, by the way, one other thing I wanted to mention was public comment. I'm going to move, it's on the agenda for number 3, I'm going to move that down to number 5 just before we close, because I do feel that I want to hear public comment. I want neighbors to be able to come out and share their thoughts. I want pickleball players and tennis players to come out and share their thoughts on, you know, how can we bring this together? How can we all work together to find a solution? So I prefer to move that down in the agenda so that I can first share what solutions we might have, and then they can share their thoughts as well, and we can have that in the minutes, okay? So one of the things that comes up is the temporary lining of a tennis court. Don't know where that could be. It could be potentially Cherry Lawn, it could be Weed Beach. That's where we have our tennis courts. Not sure if one would be available. One thing I do want to make clear is that, so tennis players know that we will never permanently line a tennis court. Okay, whatever we do would be temporary, okay, as a solution. And there are several solutions that we have. I mean, there are companies that sell kits that enable us to put down nice lines that would come right up and would not damage a court. So we could do that. We have the temporary netting already up. I know we attempted to do that already at Cherry Lawn. One of the things I do want to gather are what the numbers are of the usage of tennis courts at Cherry Lawn, of course, during the summer months when we would need it. So, so that's one thing that we could look at, and we'll gather those numbers and see what that's like. If it's not one court at Cherry Lawn, maybe it's one at Weed Beach that we could, you know, we could find. Okay, but that's just one of the thoughts that we had. The other thing is, you know, can we work out partnerships with, you know, associations, country clubs, private associations in town that may have tennis courts that aren't being used, that may want to have, you know, be able to generate some revenue off of that or something like that, where we would have a fee structure built into it or something. You know, is that something that we could do? So we're going to look into that as well. Also, there is the, can we reline, or can we repurpose paddleball courts? So that was an interesting one, I thought. I had a conversation with a company called Next Court, and they convert tennis courts into seasonal pickleball courts.
Paddle courts.
Excuse me?
They convert paddle courts into...
Paddle courts into pickleball courts, right. So what they do is they install their tiles that they would install. It takes about 2 or 3 days to do it. They need about 3 workers to do it. And the cost is about $11,000 per court. So I know somebody who has done this up at their home. They converted it inside their barn, and they've been very happy with it. And it may be a solution for us. It will not damage the paddleball courts. It would only be used in the off-season, when paddle's off-season. And the trajectory of the ball will not be affected. So it's being used throughout the country, and maybe that's a solution. We could turn 1 or 2 paddleball courts into pickleball courts.
Now, I know there's a summer paddle league that, but I don't think they use, how many courts are there? Are we 6? 6.
5 or 6 being made.
Is that 5? Okay.
6.
So, all right, so, but I don't think they would ever use more than 4, for a league, match.
Okay.
So, I mean, if that's feasible, it's certainly worth considering.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something, I was surprised. I got a phone call from somebody who said that they had used it, and they said, it'd be worth looking into it. The other thing, during this conversation with the gentleman at Next Court, he was saying, in addition to building these courts out, which I mentioned, about $11,000 is what the fee is per court, they also, there's also a ball with a company called Jug. It's Jug Pickleball. It's a little bit lighter, but a softer material, and it's been accepted by the National Association of Pickleball Players or something as a ball to use both indoor and outdoor. And the reason I bring that up is that the sound is not as loud as the ball that is currently being used in pickleball. So that's an issue that we will need to address also as we look at locations where we're going to build pickleball courts. We have to address the noise issue. Many of our parks are in neighborhoods, and neighbors are not going to want to hear it. So how do we get around that? Coming up with a different ball might be the solution that could maybe satisfy everybody. But again, this is something that we need to factor into our decisions. I mentioned partnering of the towns, the associations, paddleball courts, maybe a tennis court. And then, of course, the long-term solution would be building a court. I say long-term because that's could be 2 years out. By the time you get the cost, you go through the Board of Finance for approval, find the right location, etc. And it could be as long as 2 years. So ideally, what I'd like this committee to come away with is a temporary solution in the next 90 days, somewhere that we will be able to satisfy the needs of pickleball players, that everybody's happy with the solution, and then long-term, start the discussion with the town as to where we may be able to build one. Many people right away bring up Great Island. Oh, why can't, okay, Great Island, that's the solution. Well, we don't oversee Great Island. Parks and Rec does not oversee Great Island. So that's not a consideration at this point. Maybe down the road they may decide to do that, but that's not for us to, we can't make that decision. The other thing is also Highland Farms. That also does not fall under Parks and Rec, so that's another area that would not be in consideration. Okay, so I put those out there. What our agenda is, to do. The thoughts that we have for right now as temporary solutions, and any thoughts that you guys have, or any things you want to add to that?
I mean, the only other thing I think we should talk about is like the fee structure and everything else, just because I know there are always at times concerns in the sense of how do you reserve courts, how do you ensure that our residents get the time that they need to be able to play. Like, I love Cherry Lawn because like our open plays are actually open to anybody, but I also have heard complaints where people go on and even like they can't get courts, or even during open play it gets super busy and residents can't play.
Okay. Yeah, no, we should address the fee as well. I mean, I don't think we've had a lot of pushback on the fee as of yet, have we, Nancy?
We haven't had pushback on the fee. As far as it comes to fee structures and information, I believe some of it could be up for discussion. Any decisions ultimately come up to the Parks and Rec Commission and Parks and Recreation Department in regard to fees for lessons or for court usage time and stuff. So I wouldn't say that, you know, given you've got a 90-day timeline, that any of that will be changing. For this summer, I think, you know, you could potentially explore some of those options for the future. But I do know that a lot of the work that we've done over the last year to kind of create a diverse schedule, different times and days, and I can go over a little bit of the new schedule that'll be for the new year, has helped, I think, from our department standpoint, significantly reduce a lot of the complaints that we've had about overcrowding, or reduce the amount of potential non-residents that we've seen at the courts. I know when I started not last summer, the summer before, my phone was ringing off the hook with pickleball. I would say there's still a huge demand, but I think, you know, we've definitely tried to focus a lot on, you know, trying to enable it for our residents.
Mm-hmm.
So I think.
Well, the nice thing is if we did it in either new courts or reconfigured courts, reconfigured paddle courts at Weed, is that during the summer you've got the attendant there, so I mean you'd have to have a pass to get in. So at least you would have a fixed way of kind of limiting it to residents if we have any there.
Right. Yeah, no, and having the attendant there is important, because we do want to limit it to Darien residents, as we tried to do at Cherry Lawn as well, right? So that's come up, you know, how do we police it, or, you know, keep it to Cherry Lawn to Darien residents? And again, going back to the fee structure, it's a fair fee structure. It's $20 for 2 hours, is that right?
For an hour and a half.
Hour and a half, so. And that's shared by all the players, right? So 4 players.
Yeah, the
So
cost, I don't think the
very
cost
reasonable.
is, yeah, the cost is more than reasonable. I think it's just looking at, are there other ways to do it? Like, I know, like, New Canaan does it very differently, where it's like residents pay a one-time fee. And you can still reserve and everything else versus like
Right.
every single time. And like, I know, like, it's problematic for you because you'll reserve a court, but then there's bad weather, then you're getting requests to like refund and everything else. So I'm just wondering if there's another solution that's also less administratively taxing on you, but, you know.
We've explored those options, and I'm sorry, I'm here on Parks and Rec. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to chime in because I'm officially on the committee and not part of public comment, but we have explored through our current registration software that we have, the ability to have what is considered a membership module, which would sort of allow us to do that. I believe, off the top of my head, don't quote me on this, I can get an official number, I believe that fee was about $50,000 per year. So there is at least a fee associated that might be based on a subscription model, so if you have less people, it might be less. But that would be an additional accrued cost just to be able to give people that opportunity to sign up and then be able to make those reservations on their own without an additional fee per transaction.
Just while we're on the subject and surrounding towns, we're going to do a deeper dive into this, but right now, you know, Stamford has a number of options that they offer. Scalzi Park, Stewart Middle School, Pickleball America, of course, is now at the mall, which have a lot of courts, although I heard that they're not really being used at certain times. They're only being used at certain times of the day, other days they're not, so I don't know. I haven't spoken to them at all to find out, you know, what, if the numbers have grown or whatever, but they have 8 courts at Scalzi, and they have indoor court at Still Meadow. New Canaan has Mead Park, 5 outdoor courts. Rowayton has Bailey Beach, which they've relined the tennis court for pickleball. Norwalk has Woodland Park, 4 outdoor courts. Fairfield has Tunics Hill Park, 4 outdoor courts. And then Greenwich, I was surprised at how much they have. 2 outdoor pickleball dedicated courts at Lockland Park, 4 lined indoor courts that are on, they've converted tennis courts to pickleball courts. Byram Shore Park has 2 outdoor courts on 1 tennis court. They also have Western Middle School, 6 outdoor courts on 3 tennis courts. And then there's Greenwich Civic Center, which I assume it's indoor court. Oh, no, it's 4 outdoor and 2 indoor tennis courts. So, you know, and here we sit in Darien, we just have the one solution at Cherry Lawn. So obviously, there's a need for us to have more, and we need to come up with that solution.
How many actual courts are there at Cherry Lawn?
4 courts.
4 courts.
Right.
And that basically took over one tennis court?
One tennis court that was in the front of the park, right, as you entered. So we have our job cut out for us, but I do feel that this is a community need. This is something that, you know, we as all neighbors should come together and find a solution. I think tennis players, paddleball players also enjoy playing pickleball. It seems like just paddle tennis as a whole, which includes pickleball, paddle, and tennis, people tend to play all 3. And so, you know, let's all come together for a solution. John, I know you work at the with the DMA and the men's group, and you guys use town hall 2 days a week, is it?
Yeah, when the weather's, you know, inclement, and, you know, or if it's rainy or snowy, you know, courts aren't very good there. I mean, there's a lot of dead spots, you know, gymnasium, I don't know if you guys have played there, but it's not very good. But,
Okay, but they are permanently lined,
yeah,
And this is where, John?
town hall.
right upstairs, yeah.
Town hall, right, yeah.
Right,
Oh,
actually,
right
right
over
around the corner, can show you.
Oh, that's
after.
right,
In the
right
old
back,
gym.
Yep,
yeah.
in the gym.
Okay, but that could be an indoor winter solution for something we could talk to Parks and Rec about what, you know, what the availability might be, or in the winter. But I couldn't think of any other indoor solutions, really. The Y has it, but again, I think you need to be a member of the Y in order to use pickleball there, and they're only temporary. They throw down, excuse me, they'll throw down lines on the basketball courts or whatever, so they're temporary solutions. Right.
Right.
I think Chelsea Piers, but you have to be a member, and I think they took one of the gymnasiums, and so they've lined it, but I've heard it's not great.
Okay.
And then there's a new one,
Northeast is in Norwalk, they've got 3 courts.
There's Line Gym, right?
Yeah, it's on Martin Luther King Drive. It's actually that's not bad.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's just another option, but then you don't have to be a member, it's just it's like, I think it's $70 per an hour and a half. I don't know if you guys have played.
And
Okay.
and then there's also the new sports house.
Oh, they have it as well?
That requires a membership.
You don't have to be a membership, but it's pretty expensive. It was like $120
Per quarter hour.
for a court if you're not a member
Oh.
at off-peak hours, which is, off-peak is like 9 to 6 or 7, so, yeah.
Okay, well, for our next meeting, what we'll do is gather this, all of this information, and we'll see if there's opportunities to partner with some of these groups for a near-term solution, what the cost might be. But also, I would like to look into this next gen group. I'm going to talk to Pam and Jim about that as well. Jim Coughlin here at Parks and Rec about to do a deeper dive into that and have a conversation with that company about the converting of 1 or 2 paddleball courts to over to pickleball.
And do we know how many pickleball courts could go if you took one paddle
That's
tennis?
just one.
Just one?
All it needs is a chalk line across it to put the kitchen. The courts are the exact same size, the nets are the same height.
The nets are the same height.
I did the research last summer.
So one tennis court could give you 4 pickleball courts,
4
but
or
one
6,
paddle
depending.
only gives you one.
Right.
Right.
pickleball. Okay.
Right. So those are some of the things that we came up with. I'd love to hear from the community of their thoughts. I'd love to hear what people in town are thinking about other locations possibly. The associations, we know that there are some that have tennis courts that may be willing to work with us as well. Don't know, but we'll find out, you know, who they are. They have their own tennis courts on there as part of their associations. Maybe they'd want to work with us to convert one over to paddle. I'm not sure if the country clubs, you know, would be willing to work with us. And you know, I'm sure there's a need from their members to want to play pickleball, and maybe they would open up and work with us as well on converting a tennis court, or whether they're in the process of building one themselves. We will find all this stuff out, okay? But if we do, the other thing we do need to take consideration is the sound, the noise. being that some neighbors are very close to the parks. And so I would like us to also look into this ball as well. And maybe it's something that we require that ball be used, when playing on courts that may be close to homes. So supposedly, from what I've heard, it's been embraced and approved by the Pickleball Association of America. They use it in tournaments, etc. So it may be great. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I don't play the game as often as many of you do. I want to learn it. I do want to play it, but and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot over the next couple of months, much more about the game. So, any other thoughts you guys have?
Just a couple thoughts. At the end of the day, whatever we do, whatever venues we choose, I think Cherry Lawn is always going to be the most popular courts being used. So I think we have to be very careful about upkeeping those, because we're seeing cracks, we're seeing fences where people run into the fence and so forth. So I think we really need to. As one of the top priorities, or maybe alongside this, we really need to get those courts fixed. And then the other thing I would say is that whatever venue we do choose, if we end up with for these additional courts, I thought that it was actually, someone mentioned to me, which I think is a good one, is that lessons that Steve O'Connell and others give, maybe they only be done on those additional courts. So to keep the Cherry Lawn courts just for open play and for reservations, because again, that's our primary venue in town.
Yep. Yeah. The other thing we need to be conscious of is the congestion issue, of adding any more to Cherry Lawn or any of the other parks, so we need to be aware of that as well. So these are all things we need to keep in mind as we come to our decisions. But you're right, John, if we're gonna have that much traffic at the pickleball courts up at Cherry Lawn and there's cracks already in there, we need to, what is the upkeep going to be for those?
Jim, one of the questions I kind of have is, usage of both the existing pickleball courts at Cherry Lawn and usage of tennis courts, throughout town, at Wheat Beach and Cherry Lawn. Are the pickleball courts at Cherry Lawn, are they pretty much going, 24 hours, 7 days a week?
They're in the nice weather. They're in the nice weather, I think they are.
In nice weather?
Even in this weather, you'll see people playing there a lot.
But primarily, we're talking about, like April through October? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as the weather is nice, and even there are folks who will pull on for layers of clothing and go play out there. As long as there's no snow, there's no ice, people will go out there. And when it gets nicer, you'll see lots of folks, including kids, with their parents.
And what about, maybe you could have a better feel for, I know these guys play pickleball and they're there a lot, the tennis courts. You got a lot of tennis courts, or not a lot, but at least it seems far more tennis courts than pickleball. What's the usage on those, especially, at those peak times in the summer, late spring, early fall?
Sure. So to answer your first question, last year between May 1st and December 1st, we had over 1,000 pickleball reservations for those courts, which are available Monday through Sunday, 7:30 to dusk, basically. So we did have quite a lot of reservations this year, which helps prove the need. The hardest part is when you look at those busy times. People who really want to play, say, before work or after work. I can say, based on some of the feedback that I've heard, some of the data that I've collected, that lunchtime, there aren't a whole lot of people out there during lunchtime, but a Friday schedule may vary completely from a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, based on the nature of where we are, proximity to the city. Each day of the week could be completely different based on someone's work schedule. We do have, and forgive me, I don't recall the exact number of tennis courts at Weed Beach. I believe it's
3 in the back
7.
and 3 in the front?
At least 6.
I think I want to say it's 6 or 7.
Okay.
We do have the high school and JV teams utilize some of our courts at Weed Beach as well as at Cherry Lawn for tennis in season. We do also have camps that we run there. So our tennis courts, I mean, our tennis program here is one of our biggest programs. We've got hundreds of families and individuals who are taking lessons. So there is a lot of need there in regard to the space and the timing needed for those. At Cherry Lawn itself, I don't think, and this is just based on what I've heard from feedback, I haven't heard that there has been a significant increase of tennis players at the Cherry Lawn tennis courts since they were no longer lined for pickleball again. But that's not to say that there's any particular reason why that may or may not be. Some people just prefer to play by the beach, just like some people prefer to, you know, run by a different location in town versus one or another. So we haven't had the staff to be able to officially assess those numbers besides from members of the community or our staff when we're at the actual locations. Beyond reservations, there's not really a whole big way to kind of track all of that usage.
Anecdotally, I mean, the tennis courts have been empty the last 3 months every time I go by there. I mean, occasionally you'll see people play, you know, which, I mean, I realize it's not, you can't really play tennis as much in this time of year as you would pickle, but.
Yeah, well, I think what we need to do is really do a study and get the numbers, you know, get the actual numbers of what the volume is. Cassie, you mentioned over 1,000 reservations for the pickleball courts.
Yes.
I mean, that's a lot, right? And that's
It's a
from
lot of hours.
May through what?
May through December 1st.
Okay.
Is the revenue from that earmarked for anything in particular? Or could we use that to upgrade the trail courts?
I do believe some of it was set aside with the anticipation of looking at for maintenance of the courts in the future, as well as the hope maybe potentially someday to get an attendant on those courts, similar to how paddle currently is. With paddle, you can kind of show up and you can pay for a court then, or they can help monitor all the reservations and things. So it's a lot easier to kind of like drop in and play there. There hasn't been 100% set fix on what that is for, besides the hopes that it may help contribute towards either future courts or future repairs and things.
Can I ask, and I apologize, I should know, but I don't know, like, I know I pay when I have to reserve a paddle court, and obviously for pickle, is tennis the same way? Do you reserve courts? Do you pay for reservation for tennis courts?
Tennis at this time does not run on the same model. So paddle courts, that was the way they were for years. So the pickle is brand new. I'm not sure if we would explore the same way that those two are run for tennis, given how large our tennis programs are and how much the Darien High School community uses all of our tennis courts. But I do know that there is a process for reserving courts, but I believe it's a longer term. It's not by the week. It's at the beginning of the season. I believe there's a period of time where you can reserve. That's Jim Coglin's forte. He's the tennis guy.
Yeah, my understanding is that there's not a fee associated with it, but you can reserve the courts. So a couple of things we need to take into account. If we were to consider temporarily, you know, just putting down temporary lining, nothing again that would be permanent on any tennis court, nothing that, something that could be picked right up and would never leave a line or damage the courts. We've spent a lot of money repaving the courts, the tennis courts up at Cherry Lawn. But if we were to do something like that, we do need to take consideration the high school, the usage on those courts, seasonal play, all these other things. But maybe there's a way of squeezing out a couple of months during the summer or something like that, that we can say, okay, during these 2 months, they'll be converted to pickleball because they're not used as much, okay? And that could go for a court at Wheat Beach as well. It doesn't have to be Cherry Lawn. We also have to take into account the congestion issue as well at our parks, and how much we would be adding to that as well if we were to do that. So these are things we need to just look at before we come to a decision.
I would like to chime in. I do believe we are looking at redistributing some of our summer camps that are at Cherry Lawn. So I know for myself, a couple of the programs that I run, I'm going to be running them at Highland versus Cherry to help with a little bit of that congestion. And I do believe some of our larger camps that may have well over 50 kids may potentially be moving to Highland as well. So that may hopefully help with some of that congestion in regard to certain times of the day. And then also just quick to chime in on some of the research, some of my staff, Valerie Muller in our office, she did a lot of great research calling some of the surrounding towns, asking questions about when open play was, what their fee structure is, how many courts they have. I do have that information. I don't have it all summarized in one, but I can work with her to get you all of that information kind of in a shorter, not, 3-inch folder full of information.
Well, that'd be great to do that, and Helen, if you could work with Cassie on that, that's where your efforts on, you're not doing something that's already being worked on, that would be great. Okay.
And then off of that, one of the things we've been thinking about doing, which may be great for you as a committee to chime in, would be that we are looking to try and put out a survey. I would like to put one out sooner than later to our Darien residents, asking them about pickleball. Generally just, do you play pickleball? If you were to play pickleball, where, do you have any opposition to playing on a temporary lined court? What time of day would you be most likely to make a reservation, or which times of day would you attend? Because the hardest part is really just trying to figure out those congested times and how we can get more people on courts during those times. But I would say that outside of our busy times on the courts, I mean, they're open and available for people to just drop in and play. So I think it's just trying to get to that point of figuring out what the actual need is, which will help also with everything else you're trying to accomplish.
Okay. Is there ever any time that people are on the court and other people come that are reserved and they have to kick them off, or any of that? Is that, we ever run into that?
I'm sure there is. Before the reservation system, it was just people showing up at the courts and, oh, we think you've been playing for an hour and a half, you should get off, I want to play.
Yeah.
Now, people do at least have that permit, they can show that they've reserved the courts. We hope that everybody is playing, by the rules and following that, but I'm sure there are groups and people who sometimes get animosity, especially if they're non-residents who are on the courts.
Yeah, well, that's where maybe having an attendant there might be a good thing to do, especially if the volume is what it is, and having reservations is probably a good way to go.
Well, I would also chime in, in general, open plays are pretty well run, because I think there are some public residents who monitor and watch, have I seen.
Right.
But when that doesn't happen, I've seen it where folks don't follow our rules on open play and they will stay on a court, right? And so I don't know about attendant, but we do need to republish rules, because when it's not monitored by some of the folks that I know, it does get a little dicey.
Right.
Okay.
Cassie, you mentioned about maybe shifting some of the camps to Highland. And it seems to me when we had the meetings, I know some of you guys were at the open meeting earlier this year when we were talking about whether to redo the cherry lawn, the lower courts. And it seemed to me the major concern was the traffic and the safety and so forth. But if you move the camps, I think that would go a long way to kind of to reducing some of the traffic issues. So I'm just wondering, because of that, would it be worth revisiting the possibility of not necessarily painting new lines, but what you were saying, Jim, about putting some temporary lines on the lower courts, just one court, which would give us 4 pickleball courts down there.
Right. Yeah, that's something that we could look into. I mean, there are packages out there that are as inexpensive as $300 that look really good. And again, they won't do any damage to the courts. We just need to, be conscientious of that they are tennis courts. If we're going to use them for pickleball, we'll do picking it up and bring it back so that it becomes a tennis court again.
If you did do something like that, it wouldn't be like you could have them as pickleball courts in the morning and tennis courts in the afternoon. It wouldn't be that simple, or would it be? I don't know.
I don't know how quickly you can get them off. I think I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think you could probably do it within an hour.
Oh, yeah.
They have some
From what
rubber
I've seen.
lines, like a rubber lining that you can just swap out. Some people in certain towns, they just chalk lines on, and that way it doesn't really impact the ball play so much, but you can still see the lines and see where you'll play. We did try to do, when they were still temporarily lined, we did try to move down our beginner lessons down to the lower courts. During those lessons, at the time, we didn't opt to move our intermediate or intermediate plus down below because Steve O'Connell and I just felt that, you know, if you're a beginner, you maybe don't need to play on the exact same size court as maybe someone might be trying to play more advanced or more professionally. But then also, you know, the people who are paying for lessons are also paying to play on pickleball courts. So, you know, being mindful of that, people want to play outdoors versus moving everyone indoors for lessons is something we've tried to be mindful of as well.
Yep. Also, just so everybody knows, the courts, you know, the tennis court that was converted over to pickleball at Cherry Lawn was privately funded. That's what moved it along as quickly as it did. You know, and maybe that's an option if once we come to a solution as to, okay, hey, we can convert something or move something along, you know, should it be privately funded versus going through the town, which would take a lot longer to do. You know, one of the thoughts I've had is that, I mean, we have a lot of new retailers moving into this town. Would they be open to sponsoring the courts, you know, putting up some money or something like that to enable us to build a new pickleball court somewhere, or convert, or whatever it is. So these are all the things, again, being the first meeting, I've thrown a lot out. I'm sure we'll get a lot of feedback, but hopefully a lot of positive feedback. You know, again, we're all neighbors in this town. We want to work towards a solution. A lot of the ideas we just kicked around are temporary solutions until we can get a permanent one, but I do want to work towards a permanent solution. And I do think that that's going to entail building a court somewhere. And so we need to really look into where that could possibly be, where it will not have an impact on other things. If you guys have any other thoughts, because we're going to walk away from here and come back with a lot of information for the next meeting, and gather our thoughts and all that. But anything else you'd want to contribute today to?
I mean, I guess my question to you is, Pernella runs, I believe she now runs the Sculzy and maybe the Cummings Court in Stamford. And they, like, were the ones who figured out how to convert the ice rink and paint and actually created all of those new courts in Sculzy. Like, would you guys, as part of the committee, want to talk to those types of folks to see what did they do to...
Of course, sure.
And then I know Joe at Pickleball America, they do have sponsors. They have Diadem, they have Nike, and everything else who are sponsors to when they were starting their pickleball court. So if you want to tap that and see how they went about it, right, in terms of like businesses or whatever, then we can also ask them if
Yep.
they'd be willing to
No,
talk.
I would like to have a conversation with him about how he went about doing that. Did you say converted ice over?
An
What was
ice rink, yeah, Sculzy's is actually an old ice rink.
Yeah,
And then they basically got the town's permission and buckets of paint, and they actually painted and put up 6 different pickleball courts. And then I don't know if it was self-funded or the town helped, but then they also got the temporary nets. And it's locked up in a locker box. And the last time I talked to Pernella, they were talking to the town about putting temporary lights that you can clip onto the edge so that you can continue playing pickleball into the evening.
interesting.
And the other part of Sculzy, some of their older tennis courts do have chalk lines. And so if you played a match there, like you'll see them like fixing the chalk lines before a match.
Gotcha. Interesting. Wow, nice.
Yeah, I think a guy, Doug, used to run it, but I think he's handed it over to Pernella.
Okay. I'm just wondering if they're working with this company I mentioned earlier about converting the paddleball courts, if they're working with the same company, Metaverse or whatever, to
I
convert
can
them.
introduce you and we can ask.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Great. Anything else? Okay, what I'd like to do now is open it up to public comment if anybody wants to speak. I don't know, 3-4 minutes, we could say. I mean, it's not like we have a lot of folks here, so we want to hear thoughts and ideas. And again, I want to encourage people to come out and share your thoughts and ideas with us. So, Susan Marks.
Thanks. Susan Marks. I am a member of the RTM on Parks and Rec. I'm speaking as Susan Marks, a 34-year resident is Darien, not on behalf of anyone else. So thanks so much for doing this, I really appreciate it. Attended a lot of meetings last year and did a lot of research on my own. Just a few thoughts to keep in mind, and again, thank you so much. So I know in next year's budget, there's money, I think $8,200 for a traffic study. I would maybe encourage Parks and Rec Commission to move that up and try and find money this year to do it in the spring, because if you wait until next year's budget, you can't do anything until August. So that really means you're probably not going to do anything till the fall, because you're probably not going to do a traffic study in August. So one thing about maybe looking into doing it for this spring, but you'd have to adjust the money and find it somewhere. But it's great to hear, Cassie, that you're moving some of the bigger programs, because that will really help the congestion. So that's one thing to think about. Also, I'd love to, I totally appreciate that the Darien High School uses the tennis courts. I don't know what the true arrangement is with that, and I know the Board of Ed has been asked, do you need more tennis courts? And they've been told no, because they have this arrangement with the town. But as pickleball is becoming more popular, I strongly believe that we could use the courts with the tennis players. I know when you go indoors to play a lot of pickleball, they're lined for tennis and they have pickleball lines on them. We've already discussed up at the high school, there's turf fields that have multiple sport lines. So is it 100% ideal? No, but temporarily, it's certainly a solution. I think we all could learn to share. That would be great. Cassie, you mentioned a survey. I know you guys did a survey last year, and those results, for whatever reason, weren't really evaluated when the commission made the decision not to line the court. So I don't know how that survey, if we haven't used that survey, I'm not sure why we would do a new one, but kudos if we did. But I'd love you guys to go back and look at that survey. And then finally, private funds would be great, but at the same time, I did not contribute to the pickleball because I was not playing at the time. But I look and think, all these people that did contribute, we have beautiful courts that now the town is benefiting from, and we're paying and getting income as a town. And I could be wrong, but I know your question about is that money being used for improvements. If I'm not mistaken, all that money goes into basically the general fund for the town and gets distributed out. I mean, that's kind of how town government works. So it'd be great to say it's being utilized for pickleball. I don't think that's the case. Certainly never used to be. Things might have changed since I was involved. So anyway, those were just a few of my thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Appreciate that. I don't know about, we'll look into where the money goes into. I think you would know, being a selectman yourself, how it works much more than we would. But we'll look into that if anything may have changed.
The funds are currently going into the general fund.
Okay.
When we did analyze the thought of utilizing or the funds and what they would be for, it was for the hopes maybe for a staff member to kind of create that kitty or for some repairs and things.
Oh, okay.
We have, it just happened this first summer, so we will just have to reassess and look at some of that information. I'll bring it up to Pamela Gary this week, just to look at that.
And Susan, when you mentioned the tennis courts, you talk about the temporary lining. We're not talking about permanent. We had that whole discussion with Parks and Rec already in previous meetings. But you're speaking to the temporary lining until we come up with a permanent solution for pickleball, right?
I personally I don't see the big deal about lining the tennis courts with pickleball lines and having multiple lines on there. That's my.
Well, you'd only be talking about one court.
Correct, one
And
court.
you get 4 pickleball courts out of that.
Right. And even as far as the traffic, I felt like a lot of the logic that was used when the Parks and Rec Commission decided this was more emotional. We had high schoolers come, they were tugging at everyone's emotions. We can't play because there's going to be multiple lines. I myself called around to many schools in Fairfield County, and there are many schools, the JV players are playing on courts that are lined with both tennis and with pickleball. I also got a hold of the state, the FCX state and the CIA state, and there's no rule as of, or at least there wasn't as of last year, saying that JV matches could not be played, because that was another thing we heard. We heard a lot, I think you guys heard a lot of information that was not backed up with fact. It was a lot of emotion. So things might have changed since then, but I don't see a problem sharing. Again, like you go play indoors in New Canaan, and there's tennis lines and there's pickleball lines.
Mhm.
So you go to any, you go to field hockey, you go to soccer, lacrosse, it's all multi-lined. We just don't have enough land in this town other than Great Island, which is not under your purview, I think. We are gonna have to do some sharing, and is it ideal? Maybe not, so temporary, permanent, whatever you wanna call it, you know.
Well, but I think the matches, even the JV matches are played at Wheat Beach. They just have some practices.
Practice at Cherry.
At Cherry
Practice at
So,
Cherry
I
Lawn.
mean,
For
matches
6
are at
weeks. out of
So I
Well,
think-
that was the other problem, it's 6 weeks, even if it was only 20 some odd students, but even if it was 50 some odd students, it's for 6 weeks or even 8 weeks, it's in the middle of the day. 100%, no pickleball should be played if the high school team needs it during those hours. But it could be used before and it could be used after, and it could be used, after their season is over.
And it's one court.
Yeah.
And it's just for practice.
Right.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. Anybody else like to speak? No? All right. Well, again, appreciate everybody's thoughts. We have a lot to come up with and a lot to do. Hopefully at the next meeting, we'll have some numbers pulled together. And again, I'd like to hear from more folks about what their thoughts are. So we had a lot of ideas thrown out here today that we need to continue to work on. If no one has anything else to say, I'm going to motion for it. Oh, I'm sorry, Cassie.
I just would like to make one clarification. So at the beginning of the meeting, you did vote to move to once a month meeting. So to clarify for anyone watching at home or here, the next meeting would be February 14th, based on this agenda.
Yeah.
Skipping the next one. This schedule of meetings. So we had January 10th, January 24th, February 14th.
Okay.
So I just want
14th
to
is
clarify when our
Valentine's
next
Day.
meeting
I don't
will
know
be.
you guys, yeah, that it's on Valentine's Day. No? Okay. Okay. So 14th would be the next meeting then,
Okay.
yes, at 3:30 in this room.
Someone verified.
And, yeah, so we took the motion, didn't we, to approve that already, or do we need to do that? We already did that, right?
No, you
Okay.
approved it, I just wanted for on the record for anyone watching who might want to come to the next one to know that the next one will be the 14th,
Okay.
not the 24th.
Okay, cool. Great. Okay, so then I'll make a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Great, second?
Second.
Cool. All right, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.